Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by the North Idaho College and the upcoming Accessibility Camp Coeur d'Alene, which is on August 2nd and 3rd in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. More information on the Alley Camp Symposium can be found at nic.edu/A11Y camp. So we thank them for being our sponsor for today's podcast. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as Director of Training Solutions and Principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm a director of media productions here at Chax Training Consulting, and Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your accessibility certification for document specialist, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications. How you doing, Chad?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good. I want to start off by saying, we received a comment on our podcast from last week on YouTube that said, you guys spent 8 minutes yakking about other stuff before you got to the actual point of your podcast. Good thing I love accessibility so much. I thought, wow, you must be a new listener to the show, because we pretty much talk a little bit of an intro. I think at least 4 or 5 minutes, I think, on every podcast, don't you think? For sure. So I guess we'll keep it short this time.
We'll keep it short and sweet this time. Yeah.
I just about killed myself building koi pond yesterday. This weekend, I lifted more than 4,000 pounds worth of concrete. Actually, probably more like 5,000 pounds of blocks on and off, and mortar and all sorts of stuff. But progress is happening. There will be koi, Chad. There will be koi.
Good deal.
Well, I wanted to talk today really quickly about something that's close to my neighborhood here in California, right? This is about AB 1757. And originally it was about accessibility as a whole, and it's basically been gutted to be and reset as a new proposed assembly bill that requires, that opens up the door for web developers and digital content creators to be sued by companies and individuals for accessibility or the lack of accessibility in websites and digital content like apps.
Yeah. And that's a bit scary, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like when we think about the process, the companies go through. I mean, they typically, very few companies do web development themselves, right?
Right.
Typically you hire out that service, and it really raises, at least in my mind, a ton of questions, right? So what they're saying is, like, if I hired a web developer to build my website, and somebody goes to my website and discovers that my website is not accessible.
Yep.
What this law is saying is that they could sue the developer as the responsible party for building that website.
Right. It said the bill actually says these principles are already existing in case law, so business establishments are not getting any new benefits from these provisions. Instead, this bill would significantly expand the legal liability of business establishments as well as third-party web developers for websites and mobile apps that do not conform to WCAG 2.1 AA. In fact, Chad, this is the very first bill in the United States that requires WCAG 2.1 AA. It's the first time it's been cited. But I think the bigger picture here is, I don't think it's a far cry to go from web app and web developer creating digital content to us as remediators providing PDFs and digital content accessible PDFs and digital content for us to be included in this as well. Right. I think it's a bit scary.
It is. And I mean, you and I have been in a similar situation, right? And we'll keep the parties innocent, right? But we did work for a client who said, hey, we had all of these files remediated by another company, and we just need you guys to do this to these
Right.
files, right? They wanted
Right.
an addition, I think form fields, right?
Yeah.
Basically, make the files interactive form fields, and we received the files, and they were in no way accessible.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there
There
were a
was
ton of issues, a ton of barriers that existed in those files. And we just kind of, I know you and I, I mean, we work 3,000 miles apart, but you and I were on a meeting and we were looking at each other. We're like, oh my gosh, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
there were
And
whole
so,
paragraphs of text that were tagged as figures because
yeah.
some underlying divider between a block of text on one section and a block of text on the other. It was pretty I was just like, "Whoa."
And so the interesting thing that we ran into with that, right? We went back to the client and tried to, be as helpful as we could, but we effectively said, "Hey, these documents are not at all accessible."
Right.
And they went back to the company that did the work,
Yep.
and the company pretty much said, "Hey, that job's done."
Yeah,
What
you said it was acceptable. You accepted the deliverable. It passed the Acrobat checker, so therefore it's accessible. And I was just blown away because
Yeah,
these weren't a few documents. This was 4,000 pages of documents. And it was a substantial increase in cost for them
yeah.
as the client, because not only did they pay this other company to do the work, but then they had to pay us to redo the work to get it to be in a place that is accessible for us to do the part they wanted us to do.
And I feel like that the company didn't take any responsibility for their own work,
Yeah.
right? Because like when we do remediation for clients, that file is PDF UA compliant, it is WCAG compliant before we give it back to the client, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't count on the client having the knowledge to say, "Oh yeah, this looks good." Right?
Yes.
Because not all
Mhm.
clients are in that situation, right?
No.
So it's really our responsibility, and we do take that responsibility very seriously.
Well, in
We
many cases,
ensure,
in many cases, we test the documents with screen readers. Like
of
I'm going
course,
through, or we're going through those documents and making sure that certain problem areas really read the way they're supposed to read. And if not, we come back to the client and say, "Hey, this isn't, we need to make some changes here." And sometimes the client's sure, yes, no problem. And other times the client is no. And now with this
yeah.
bill, that gives me pause to go, can I afford to work with a client who isn't willing to make the document fully accessible? Because that opens up me now for personal or business liability to be sued by the end user or by the company I'm providing the work for. I mean, now do I have to go back and give them a document that says I certify that I'm not willing to make this fully PDF UA compliant? I mean, I don't know how you, but I don't know many clients that are going to sign that document.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I actually worked with a client on Friday, Dax, and they were telling me that their client, and we run into this all the time, their client was asking that she insert thin spaces between all letters in an acronym
Hmm.
so that it's voiced slower. Do you know what I mean? So that it's
Wow.
so
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And we run into that a lot, Dax, where clients impart their personal belief
Yeah.
into what they think accessibility should be
Yep.
because they don't really understand the user experience,
Yeah.
right? And I have to tread lightly, in that situation, but ultimately I was saying, like, listen, that is not part of any standard. It's certainly not a requirement. And so if that's what your client is asking for, make sure you bill for it, first of all.
Right.
And second of all, I would explain to them that is not a needed element, to meet standards requirements.
Well, when I worked at another engineering company, and this is a large engineering company, I actually brought this up. This has been 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I brought this up to them and said, "Hey, we really need to deal with clients like, and I'll name names here, NASA for one, and the EPA as another, that were like, look, we want you to do most of accessibility, but we really don't want you to take care of these other things. And I said, hey, we need to cover ourselves here. And so I came up with an accessibility compliance statement that was a 1-page sheet that said, this is the standard we adhere to. This is the standard our documents will be. And then the client's part was, I, client name, understand that I'm willing to follow all of the accessibility requirements stated above, except colon. And then below was a checkbox set of like 8 different things: color contrast, colorblind compliance, tables, images of text, the ones that we always get as, things
Right.
that people kind of get squirmish about. Um, and their legal team said, no, we will lose clients if we have them try to sign this. No one's going to sign it. And I thought, wow, okay, but that sure puts us on at the tip of the spear when it comes to litigation.
I was just going to say, like, when somebody encounters a file that presents a barrier, and they go to that client, and the client says, "Oh, well, we didn't remediate this file. It was Dax that remediated this file," and they come to you.
Yep.
I mean, it's almost like your word against theirs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that puts you in a really delicate situation. So,
Well,
um,
I had to spend 3 different meetings with the legal team trying to explain to them what accessibility was and why it was important, which was also, in his thing. I actually found that document. It was use of color only, changes in natural language, Unicode font characters, logical reading order, figures, tables, artifacting decorative content, and then I had a spot for others. So those are the typical things we get pushback for. If you wanted the list, those are the things you typically get pushback for. And yeah, it was interesting how it was basically no. But now with this AB 1757, I really feel like you can't you I'm going to be thinking about whether or not I want to take on clients that are not wanting full accessibility.
right. And I mean, couldn't you say that California in many ways sometimes leads the charge on certain implementations,
Yeah.
that get, created. I mean, I always feel like California is, uh, they're kind of like the first ones to
Yep.
kind of implement something, and then other states tend to follow suits. And
Yeah.
so, um, that they're currently, this law that we're talking about only applies to California. However, as other states start, implementing their own accessibility requirements, I got to believe they're going to look to California as, as the
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 example,
leader,
right?
if you will, or
Yeah,
the
sure.
example. Yeah, yeah. So
Well, what's
it
interesting though
really,
is if your business in California, but you're doing business on the web, you're liable for anyone from any state. So, Chad, if you go onto a business in California and you're in Pennsylvania and their website isn't accessible, they're in violation of California law.
Dax, it just dawned on me that our business is in California.
Exactly.
Uh,
Thank goodness our website is accessible, and I've gone through and tested it to make sure it is, right? I mean,
exactly.
so really it is definitely a thing. So anyway, I don't want to spend more time on that, but guys, go do your research. AB 1757 doesn't really apply to documents right now, but if you consider PDFs as part of the web content, then
Mm.
I think there's a case that could be made for it. And if not, it's not very far behind.
I mean, listen, the reason we often get involved, right, in projects is because the client is taking the initiative to make their website accessible. And as part of that process, right? They're like, okay, we're going to make your website accessible. Oh, and by the way, there's 750 documents on your website
Yes.
that are not accessible, right?
Yeah.
And that's usually when we get the call, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, wow, this is a thing. We need to figure this out.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
Dax, I wanted to talk about, Adobe Acrobat,
Oh, yes.
recently released an update. Now, that update that's currently in beta, right? Or is that a public
No,
release?
it's
That is a
public
public
release.
release.
Yep.
So the public, a recent public update of Adobe Acrobat added an additional alternate text field into the object properties dialog box,
Well,
right?
it
So
actually kind of updated that whole box to look a little
yeah.
different and be styled a little different. Yeah.
So now when you right click on a tag and choose properties, previously there was one alt text field. So if you selected a figure tag, you were adding alt text for the figure. And if you clicked on a text tag, it was alt text for the text.
Yep.
But now in that dialog, um, and I don't have the update yet, Dax. What exactly are the names of the fields?
So it is alternate description for links and alternate description for graphics.
Right. So
So
they separated them out, right? So that and I guess the intent there was to, if you are working on a link, there's now a dedicated box. And the reason they did that, and we've talked on this on the podcast before, right? The reason they did that is the way they implemented it. If you add alt text for a link, it automatically adds that text as the contents entry for the link tag, right?
yep,
And we talked about this. That is the PDF UA requirement, right?
yep,
For to meet PDF UA standards, you need to add the alt text as the contents entry of the link tag. Now, the problem with that,
here comes drum roll,
here it comes.
please.
The problem with that is that neither JAWS nor NVDA, the two most commonly used assistive technologies out there, do not read the contents entry of a link tag,
Right.
right? So even if you add the alt text as a contents entry, it's never voiced when you read that document,
Which
right?
to me seems just unbelievably frustrating, because here we've talked about this a few times, right? On one hand, we have code developers, and I don't know how many of them have disabilities or how many people they are testing, but I do know two people. Well, I know of one person particularly that left PDF UA, left the PDFA because they were a native screen reader user and got tired of getting shut down, right?
Mm,
But the answer to me is, on one hand, well, the situation is, on one hand we have code developers saying our code is correct. On the other hand, we have assistive technology saying we're doing the best we can to provide a product that allows people to access more content, and the user saying, well, I just want to be able to access my content, right? And so the programmers are saying, if your code isn't correct, oh well, then the end user should complain to the software developers. And I have so much, almost anger. I have so much
yeah.
frustration with that, because in the end, we made accessibility requirements to help the end user, not have them be damned because some other program. JAWS and NVDA have been around long before, or as long as PDFA or PDF UA, and I don't understand. It makes me so upset.
I know we're soapboxing a little bit here, but ultimately, I think the reason why you and I get angry about this stuff is because at the end of the day, the user is the one being left out in the rain,
Yep.
right? And that is the reason why we're doing this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the standards should be written to benefit the end user. Now,
Yes.
again, we could point fingers all day. I mean,
Sure.
we could say, well, why doesn't JAWS and NVDA update their software to read the contents entry?
Which
Right? I
I
mean,
agree
that's
with which
yeah,
which
I
I
do
don't think
too.
that's a bad. I don't think that the PDF UA standard people should be beholden to whatever JAWS and NVDA are doing, but there has to be a meeting of the minds, right? And
Right,
we've got to find
right.
some kind of compromise that says, okay, well, you Chad, you told me the perfect solution to this.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I feel like an easy way to solve this, at least short term, is to add it in the contents entry and in the alt text field
Yep.
for the link tag, right?
Yeah.
And
Why not?
and so that's gonna give your checker all green check marks.
Yep.
You're gonna meet the accessibility standard, and it'll actually benefit the end user because when they read that link, it's gonna read the alt text for the link.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a pretty simple solution, but I think one of the reasons why I'm annoyed about this is that we've been through this with Adobe InDesign.
Yes.
We've had this discussion with Adobe. We have discussed this at length, right? And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but when InDesign first implemented adding alt text to a link, they added it to the alt text field. And then, of course, the standards people were like, no, 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 that's the wrong place to put it. You got to put it in the contents entry. And Adobe's like, oh, I'm so sorry. We'll fix it. And then they fixed it and added it into the contents entry. And then one day somebody's like, hey, my alt text isn't being read for my links.
Yeah.
And we all discovered, like, holy crap, the assistive technologies are not reading that contents entry. So it's really frustrating, and I feel like Adobe could have had a little bit of forethought on this, and if they're gonna add that feature, go back and look at the discussions we had about this already, and identify the barriers, and figure out how we can make it better. So
Well,
um,
so we kind of got off on a tangent a bit, but we were talking about the bug in Acrobat here, and so the bug actually happens in, as far as we know, foreign non-English language versions of Acrobat, where the alternate text for images and alternate text for descriptions fields are grayed out no matter whether you're applying it to a figure or a link or anything. You just don't have the ability to add alt text anymore in that panel.
and what I've not tested is if you add alt text to a link, but you use the figure field,
You can't.
does it
It's grayed
still?
out. It's
Oh, even
grayed
that
out.
one's. Oh, so you're saying the alt text for graphic field is grayed out if you select the link tag?
Yes. So right
Ah,
now
okay.
it depends on what you select. If you select a graphic, only the alt text for images is available to be typed into. If you select a link, then the alternate description for links is there. So when you select a graphic or a link, only that field is open and available for you to type text into. So that's kind of it. But in the foreign language versions, neither are available to type in. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out if you actually can um, uh, apply alt text using the accessibility tool, set alternate text, right? But you could only do
Yeah.
that for graphics. You can't really do that for a hyperlink. It doesn't look for hyperlinks. It only looks for graphics. So I guess I kind of answered my own question.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting. So while we're on this topic, Chad, it would be worth reviewing this with our listeners. And by the way, if you are not if you're a first time listener, Chad and I run a Facebook group called PDF Accessibility. It is the world's largest PDF accessibility help group in the available. And so if you go to Facebook and search groups for PDF accessibility, we have about 3,500 ish
Hmm.
members, a little bit more than that, and very, very active group. I mean, I'm watching threads right now more than I'm answering them, which is actually a pretty unique place to be in. Correcting where needed, but definitely,
Yeah.
people are doing well. But I thought we'd talk about the difference between alt text, actual text, and expansion text, because I think people, I know I've seen lots of InDesign files where I go into the object export properties and I see both the alt text and the actual text fields filled out.
Yeah. I think it's I think it's one of those situations where people figure both is better than none.
Right.
or both is better than one type of thing.
Right.
And it's not really the case. I guess we could argue that it's a subtle difference, but when you put alt text in both of those fields, only one of them wins, right?
Yes.
You don't get double benefit, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, and the actual text is the one that wins. So when you
Exactly.
apply actual text and alt text to a certain object, the actual text is the one that wins. And let's talk about actual text, alt text, and expansion text as a definition. So
Yeah.
alt text is an alternate description for the image, right? What CAG says, if you have an image, you must provide an alternate description that allows people to translate it into other types of content. Um, and so you hear the word graphic before or after, depending upon what screen reader you're using. That what you just heard or what you're about to hear is a description for that object. If you use actual text is designed to be a one-to-one replacement for text, right, Chad?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like let's talk about use cases for that.
Yeah, it's a one-to-one replacement for images of text is typically the typical use case. So
Right.
if I've got a newsletter and at the top I've got a banner that says October newsletter, and I did it in Photoshop because I wanted 3D text and a drop shadow and all those other 1991 attributes to a font, and then maybe I've got some leaves that are kind of falling from the sides, for fall. But all I really want the user to get is October newsletter, and it's all an image. I can use actual text to actually replace the graphic element with the words October newsletter. In fact, I could even say heading level 2 or heading level 1 October newsletter in that actual text.
Well, and the probably the most common use for that, in a lot of publications, the designer will often design the cover
Mhm.
for the product, right? It'll be done in Illustrator or Photoshop, and within that design is text that to your point that says, October 2023 newsletter or
Yep.
whatever it might say. And the problem, of course, is that it's a figure, right?
Right.
Because it was done in Illustrator or Photoshop, it's actually a figure. And so, now if it's important that the user knows that this is a graphic element, then you probably want to add alternate text to that, because then
Yes.
it's going to say graphic. And even in your alternate text, you may say creative illustration of an autumn scene, and then October 2023 newsletter or something
Yeah,
to that effect,
100%.
right?
Yep.
However, sometimes uh, maybe they'll only make a figure out of the text that says October 2023 newsletter,
Yep.
right? It's a banner, it's a graphic element, whatever. That is really a good use case for actual text, because now the fact that it's a figure is irrelevant. We just want the user to know that this says October 2023 newsletter, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the differences are somewhat slight, and I think it's worth noting that you can add actual text. You can add alternate text to a text tag also, right?
right.
But the behavior is going to be a little bit different, right? Because it's not going to be voiced as a graphic. I think it'll still voice it as whatever the tag is, right? Like if you add alternate text to a to an H1 tag,
Mhm.
I think it'll still announce it as an H1,
Yes.
but instead of reading the text of the tag, it's going to read the actual text.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and so alt text and actual text applied to text will voice as actual text. It won't say graphic. It just re-
Yeah.
reads what's there. And that, which leads us to our next one, which is expansion text, right? So oftentimes we have URLs. We have acronyms that may be a series of letters, and we find that the screen reader might pronounce them as a word, and we don't really want that. So we can use expansion text. What's really nice is Common Look has a feature actually to globally apply actual text or expansion text to every instance of an acronym within a document, which is a huge time
Oh, it's
saver.
such a
Yeah.
fantastic feature in my opinion,
And there is a WCAG
and
requirement for AAA that says you cannot have acronyms in your document, that everything must be spelled out. So if your
mm,
institution requires that AAA requirement, then expansion text is your solution.
and you basically want a copy of Common Luck, right? I mean, that's really, because it's really the only way I know to be able to do it.
In
Many
mass, yeah.
many of our listeners know that I'm very passionate about. I've been wanting InDesign to give me the ability to tag character styles, and if they did that, I would be able to use a character style to add actual or expansion text to acronyms automatically in that document, so that when
Yep.
I export that PDF, they're just all done. I don't
Yeah.
have to do a darn thing, So
Yep.
again, Adobe, if you're listening to our podcast, put that on your list.
Yeah, but put fixing the actual text alt text thing on there
Yeah,
first
yeah,
for
for
the alt
sure.
text for images, and that is definitely a thing. And if you are not subscribed to the beta versions of Acrobat, note that there's some changes coming. Maybe in the beta version of Acrobat, the panels have been reversed. So the tags tree is now on the right side of the screen, and the toolbars are all on the left. I don't know whose bright idea that was, but
Well,
interesting.
and what's good to know though is that when you do open up Acrobat and you see that, if you go to the view menu, there's an option that says disable new Acrobat. And if you choose that, that is going to take you back to your tried and true Acrobat interface and move.
Oh, there it is. It's right below view.
Yeah. Yeah.
Disable new Acrobat.
Yeah. So
Restart.
that's how you could kind
There
of
we go.
turn it on and off.
Ah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because trust me, I did the same thing when I opened Acrobat for the first time. That beta version, I'm like, what on God's green earth am I
yes.
looking at?
No.
This is insane. But I gotta say, like I've been using Acrobat forever. Acrobat 11, Acrobat 12, which I think is DC, and now we've been through multiple iterations of DC. Um, Acrobat loves to just move stuff for the
Yeah.
hell of it. I
Yeah.
swear to God, they just love moving stuff. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no benefit. They're just like, oh, we're going to move this over here this time. And you're like, I've been going there for 7 years. Why did you move it?
Well,
So,
I'd really love to see them implement a zoom level for the tags tree.
yeah,
That is a
yeah.
low vision. If you are low vision and you are trying to remediate, but you still have sight, those tags are so tiny. And often in our presentations, when we're trying to show them on screen to an audience of 300 people, we have to use workarounds to make it all work. And, just give us the ability to zoom into the tags tree, using our scroll wheel or set a percentage or whatever. That would make life so much easier.
It really would. I mean, Dax, you and I are working on a project right now where we're recording videos
Yep.
of the Acrobat interface, and we are magnifying the tags tree when we
Yep.
get to it, so
Yep.
that the viewer can see it a little bit more easily. So
Yeah.
it makes for a bit of a pain on our end, but it's
Well,
certainly beneficial to the end user. So
agreed.
Adobe InDesign recently released an update. I can remember to talk into my microphone, which is version 18.4. So it's the latest update to Adobe InDesign. And in that version, one of the fixes is that, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, Dax, really long style names
Oh, uh-huh.
fail
Right.
when you export to a PDF file. Like what you'll often see if you look in your tags tree, everything is like H1, H2, P, whatever. And then all of a sudden you'll see a tag called subhead, subhead 4, or whatever you named
Yeah.
it.
Bold
And
12
it's,
point Arial,
yeah,
I've seen some crazy styles.
it drives me crazy. But yeah, so apparently they fixed that problem. I still recommend to people keep your style names short and
Yep.
sweet.
Yep.
But apparently now, if you are a long style name person, they address that problem and fix that bug.
I've found actually in when you download templates from a stock from stock.adobe.com, couldn't get that out there for a second. Um, that there are many times where the InDesign files have these really long style names, and I think I figured out what it is they're not InDesign files. They are other files converted to InDesign and by a machine learned language. And when that machine language converts them to InDesign, it just assigns, it takes the properties of that file, that style, and makes it the style name. And
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? But I get it when you're trying to come up with something machine driven, that's
Right.
kind of all you can do, right?
If I'm being honest, when I get those files, I literally break a link to every style
Yep.
and I just recreate them.
Yeah.
I'm like, because I just don't like how, a lot of times the style contains all these extra attributes
Yep.
I'm like, why does it have the kerning value built into the style? And why does it
Right.
have all these obscure values? So I'm just like, get rid of it. Let's clean it up. And that way my styles are more robust, I think. There are times when you have a style applied and you click on basic paragraph and it maintains all the formatting but applies basic paragraph with a bunch of overrides,
Well, if
right?
that happened, then I think that would be great, because then
It would
in
actually work
fact it
okay.
would work okay, because then you could just write, you could select that text and then say new style, override, or
Well,
make a
that's what
duplicate style, then do over the make redefine style, right?
that's also what break link to style does.
Oh,
Um, let me when you
um,
break a link to a style, right? What it does is it says, I am no longer connected to this style. Let me do it real
maybe
quickly.
you're teaching. You know what, Chad? I just thought you were talking about that as a process, as a but you're actually talking about in InDesign, there is a way to literally make a command, or to use a command that is break link to style.
Yeah, and so I just tested it, and what it does is it literally breaks a link to any style. It
Huh.
doesn't apply basic paragraph. It'll literally say no style applied. But then from there, if you create a new style, now you could build your own style for the look of that and make that work. So
Wow.
yeah, I use that command a ton because so many times I get files that somebody try. Oh, when I use that, Dax?
Hmm.
So many times people send me InDesign documents and they have a paragraph style and a character style applied to that text.
Right.
And that just totally messes you up because you think you're creating a style that looks like this, but that underlying character
Yep.
style is faking you out. And
Right.
so what you could do is on that character style, just say break link to style.
Yeah.
And now that just becomes an override to the paragraph style that's applied. And then you can either redefine the style or create a new style, whatever you choose.
Sure.
And then you're no longer dependent on that character style for the appearance of the text.
I was looking for the screenshot of what the where the break link to style is command is, and I came across a 2007 post of our good friend. This is out on Gilbert Consulting. Um,
Oh, Keith Gilbert?
Keith Gilbert. And yeah, from 2007. So it just goes to show you can use InDesign forever and still not. So where is the break link to style?
So if you go to your paragraph styles panel,
Mhm.
you have to click on the panel menu in the upper right corner of
Right.
that panel. And in that panel menu, you'll see the option to break link to style.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about was you and I have developed a new script. Um,
Yes.
so this is a really cool one. This is for InDesign. If you want to quickly highlight the styles that have export tags set to them, you can have them color coded paragraph shading. It's not really paragraph shading, but it looks like paragraph shading, so that you can quickly see where your H1s, H2s, H3s are. And we got this inspiration from the tags panel inside InDesign, which a lot of first time users mistakenly think is accessibility tags. And InDesign's XML tags apply those little brackets around all your different styles, which I thought, wow, how cool. This really makes it easy for me to understand where my styles are, except for those aren't accessibility styles. Those are
Right.
XML styles. So, yeah. So we took that idea and moved it over. And now this script is available if you take our InDesign classes. So if you are taking an InDesign for Accessibility class or InDesign Basics class on our website, accessibilityunraveled.com, then you will actually get this plugin in addition to the color contrast checker plugin and the no, we're not. The alt text and alt text extractor comes with the writing with accessibility in mind. So, or the secrets of writing effective alt text. So, those two great plugins, the color contrast plugin, and now the export tag highlighter, are available if you enroll in any of our classes. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely,
It's
definitely a cool thing.
for sure. For sure. All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps up today's podcast. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I hope you found some useful morsels of information inside of there.
Yeah.
Once again, we want to thank the North Idaho College and their upcoming Accessibility Camp Coeur d'Alene event, which is on August 2nd and 3rd
Where
in
you
Coeur
and I will
d'Alene,
be.
Idaho.
Yeah,
You and I are going to be there. Yep.
yeah,
Well, you and I are heading out on Monday. I
yeah.
think we're heading out on August 1st, and we're doing a pre-conference event
Yep.
on, is it on the 1st or I think it's on the 2nd.
It is
Yeah,
on the
we're
1st. We're
doing,
coming in July 31st. Our
that's
pre-conference
right.
is on the 1st, and
Exactly.
it'll be document testing with a screen reader, right? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's one of my favorite classes to teach
Yep.
because, I love seeing the aha moments,
Yeah.
when you're showing people assistive technology and they're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So again, we want to thank the North Idaho College for their sponsorship. You can find out more about their event at nic.edu/A11Y camp. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.